Yesterday, I talked about how I was going to do a recap video of the CCL Draw that is going to happen on Monday. Well, today is Monday, and the CCL Draw just happened, and I am going to quickly do a quick recap in terms of the matchup that's going to be happening in the first round. Now, when you look at these matchups, there's definitely some very interesting matchup in the first round, although I'm pretty sure most of the matchup when you see in the first round is pretty predictable of who is actually going to win. And keep in mind, this is not a prediction video, even though technically I will kind of have my thought of who exactly is going to be moving on into the quarterfinal. And by the way, if you basically split between the first four match with the last four match, and if you pretend the first four match is in the top part of the bracket and the last four match here on this board is in the bottom part of the bracket, well, if you're in the top part of the bracket, I'm sorry to say, but you are going to be in for a brutal journey to try to get to the final, because when you look at the two bracket, the top part of the bracket seems like have more heavyweight team and more teams that potentially could be in contention of going all the way to the final than you would see in the bottom part of the bracket. But with that being said, let's actually talk about these matchup and let's take a look at which team these five MLS team will be facing in the first round of the Concacaf Champions League. And we start off with Atlanta United. They are going to be playing against Montreal, which I think this should be an easy win for Atlanta. I mean, I did say that last year when they were facing against Heredino, and boy, they really made it tough on themselves in terms of moving on into the second round. And let's just hope that that won't be the case this time, and that this should be a easy kind of two-legged win for Atlanta, so that they can move on into the quarterfinal, where they could potentially be facing against Club America in the rematch of the Champions Cup just a couple of months ago in the quarterfinal, because Club America is going to be facing against Comunicaciones, which I think Club America should easily win that. And there is no doubt that if Club America does face against Atlanta, yeah, you know Club America won nothing but revenge for what happened a couple of months ago in the Champions Cup. And especially Atlanta got to realize that this time, not only they have to potentially beat Club America in these two-legged affair, but they also have to go to the Azteca, and that is a place where not a lot of MLS team has been able to go in there and grab a victory. I think there's probably only one team that comes into my mind right now that actually went to the Azteca and got a victory, and that was a couple of years ago when TFC, who famously put that on that absolute spanking of Club America, by winning 4-1 against them to move on into the finals. So, you know, that should be a very tasty kind of matchup if that is going to be the case in the quarterfinal. But it's definitely a matchup that I don't think any Atlanta United fans are going to be very happy to see, if that, of course, would happen. Then we got Cruz Azul versus Portmore United. Despite the fact that Cruz Azul has been struggling in Liga MX, I think they should be able to beat Portmore United, who's probably considered the weakest team in the competition, because they're from the Caribbean region. And, you know, no disrespect to the teams that is in the Caribbean region, but usually they are probably the most weakest team that comes into the Concacaf Champions League. Then we got probably the best match of the first round between LAFC versus Club Leon. And I think on Sunday I talked about how there was one team from pot number 2 is a Liga MX team, and I talk about how it's Cruz Azul. That was actually wrong. It's actually Club Leon that is the only team that is in the second pot of the CONCACAF Champions League draw, instead of all the other team is in pot number 1. And it's kind of interesting because Club Leon, for the past couple of season in Liga MX, they are considered near the top part of the table, and it's interesting why exactly they are in pot number 2, whereas you have Cruz Azul, who's in pot number 1, and they have not really done that well in Liga MX for the past couple of seasons, except for that one season. I think they finished first place in Liga MX, and that was really the only season I remember that they actually did very well and are near the top part of the table. But going back to this matchup, yeah, this is really, I think, a battle between two teams that had amazing regular season. Obviously, LAFC, they are the reigning Supporters Shield champion, and they are the team that of course have the best regular season of any team in MLS history. And now they're going to be facing against Club Leon, which I believe they also finished top in the table in Liga MX in the regular season. And both of these teams kind of had some same fate in the playoffs too. You know, LAFC in the playoffs, they got eliminated by Seattle, while Club Leon in Liga, they got eliminated. I think it was Monterrey that eliminated them in the Liga. So yeah, this is both of these teams definitely had similar story from the prior season, and it's going to be interesting to see who's going to emerge them as victory. And if LAFC can beat Club Leon, then you could definitely make the case that LAFC could be the team that maybe can go all the way into the Concacaf Champions League final. Like, I know if you look at all the teams that's heading into or the MLS team that is going to the Concacaf Champions League this season, a lot of people say LAFC are the one that probably might go all the way to the final and become the first team to win it as an MLS team. But the thing is, they now have the toughest opponent to face in the first round out of all the 5 MLS teams that is facing in the first round of the Concacaf Champions League. Now, looking at the bottom part of the bracket and looking at the 5th match that was drawn, it's between Tigres versus Alianza. I expect Tigres to win this one, although I will say this, and just a bit of a warning to Tigres fans. Alianza last year, when they faced against Tigres' big rival Monterrey or Rayados, they really made Rayados work to try to get into the next round. In fact, they were actually on verge of potentially create a huge upset, and that Rayados actually was able to move on into the next round and able to beat Alianza or eliminate them because they got a late penalty in the second leg of the game, and that is how Alianza got eliminated. So, you know, I don't know if Alianza is going to put that same pressure to Tigres this time, but you never know. I mean, this is a team that last year they could prove that they could create some big upset in the Concacaf Champions League, and I'm pretty sure this season they're going to be very motivated that, you know, they were so close last season to create the big upset. They want to create the big upset and want to finish the job this time if they, of course, can beat Tigres in these 2 legs. Then we got NYCFC versus San Carlos, and there's no doubt that I think this is probably the easiest matchup that any MLS team is going to be facing a team in the first round of the Concacaf Champions League. Although, for NYCFC, there is a lot of debate that, once again, they're going to have some similar problem that they had in the playoffs where they're not going to be able to be playing at Yankee Stadium or at their home because, you know, when NYCFC had this lease with the Yankees to play at Yankee Stadium, part of the lease says that they can only play specific amount of home games there, and that there's kind of like a number that tells them how many home games that they can play at that stadium. And if they do play some Concacaf Champions League game at home and at Yankee Stadium, it will exceed the amount if you include the regular season games. So that's why there's a discussion that they might be playing somewhere else again. Some people say that they were going to be playing at Citi Field again, just like they did in the playoffs, but that doesn't seem like it's going to be the case. There's also some rumor that they were going to be playing at where the Brooklyn Cyclones and where that stadium right next to Coney Island is going to be, which that would definitely be a very interesting venue. I mean, who would have thought a CONCACAF Champions League is going to be playing at one of the most famous amusement park in the world? And that stadium is also very small. Like, it's only 3,000 seat stadium, so I'm kind of surprised the fact that they choose that venue, consider, you know, I know NYCFC fans, I'm not quite sure. I'm pretty sure they're probably still sold out that ground, even though, you know, NYCFC tends to don't draw a big crowd whenever there is a midweek game, and all these CONCACAF Champions League game is in the middle of the week, but that still feels like a very small venue in terms of hosting a CONCACAF Champions League game. And I think that's the one thing about CONCACAF Champions League is different to the Champions League in Europe, where in the UEFA Champions League there is kind of like a limit in terms of how, you know, you have to have this amount of seats at the stadium to host a game, and you also have to have like at least a 3 or 4 star kind of category stadium to host a Champions League kind of game. And this is why you see sometimes those Eastern European team in the Champions League have to play in bigger stadium or have to move to a bigger stadium near the biggest city in their country, because their stadium usually does not fit in terms of UEFA requirement of hosting a Champions League game. But of course, Concacaf doesn't have this in the Champions League. At least I think that is the case. I might be wrong. For some people that think that of course is the case. And by the way, if you think that is the case, then let me know in the comments below that I'm actually wrong. The fact that Concacaf does not have a limit of what the stadium requirement has to be to host a game. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see where exactly NYCFC is going to play this home game versus San Carlos in the Concacaf Champions League. Then we got the Seattle Sounders take on Olympia, and this is actually a matchup that happened 5 years ago, back in 2015. And one thing that I remember from this matchup was that there was a huge brawl that happened in this match. Now, I don't think either of these teams remember that brawl that happened, because I'm pretty sure the teams 5 years ago is just completely different to the team that is going to be facing off each other. So there's no retribution in terms of what happened 5 years ago. But it's just kind of interesting to bring it up. And, you know, I also think Seattle should be able to move on into the second round. Like, they are basically the most experienced MLS team in the Concacaf Champions League, besides maybe Montreal in this competition out of all the MLS teams. So I think they should be able to move on into the next round. Which, speaking of Montreal, that's bring us to the last matchup of the first round of the Concacaf Champions League that was draw, which is them between Saprissa. And if there is one team that I am definitely uncertain of potentially moving on into the next round besides LAFC when they face against Club Lyon, Montreal is that team. Because as much as I know they have known for these crazy kind of CONCACAF Champions League run that nobody expected from them, they are going to be playing against a team that I think, in my opinion, is probably the one team that is not a Liga MX team, but is one team you definitely do not want to face in a CONCACAF Champions League, known as Saprissa. Because Saprissa, they are a regular in the CONCACAF Champions League. They have a lot of experience in terms of playing in this competition, and there's no doubt that if you look at talent-wise, you could say that maybe Saprissa has more of the talent than what Montreal has, and that, you know, for Thierry Henry, if he wants to try to get this Montreal team into the next round and able to beat Saprissa, he's better think about signing a couple of players to get this team ready to face this Costa Rican powerhouse, because the squad that they have right now, I don't really have a lot of faith in terms of them facing a Costa Rican powerhouse like Saprissa. And, you know, hopefully they, of course, prove me wrong once they face that, and hopefully they'll once again do what they have done in the past, which is go on a crazy CCL run. But as of now, when you look at this matchup, and if there's one team you could definitely say that could be out in the first round, it would be Montreal. But either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of these matchup, and do you think an MLS team will finally win CCL this year, and that is this finally the year where we're going to see the first MLS team to ever lift the CONCACAF Champions League trophy in the first time history. But either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.